Ain't no walls that walks the line. There's a rare few who think outside the box together for the crew. To break the equations, not bound to any rule. Exposing to the world the universe's own view. It takes the talent of the craftsman, it takes the mind of the fool, to make the vision realize energy and matter in a duel. To a break, to a duel.
Hello everyone, my name is Nathan, otherwise known as No Man Builds. We got Joe here today, and we are jumping down the rabbit hole, man. We're just going to talk about everything from wormholes to teleportation to anything you got. Joe, what's going on, man?
Hey, what's up, Nathan? Everybody in the chat. Hope everybody's having a good Saturday.
Yeah, I am.
Yeah, man. You all ready for some woo? We get woo.
Ready to go right down that rabbit hole, man. Head first.
That's it. Yeah, where to begin with this one? We got all the good stuff, huh?
Yeah, well, let's just kind of begin with where it starts. I mean, the first thing is you have to build the ether out. So let's just kind of, because we're builders here usually on this channel, and then we'll jump right into the woo. So what do you need? The basic understanding of this thing is this is an energy well, that you're going to need a couple different things. You're going to need a rotational magnetic field. You're going to need it to also go over onto the inside like this as it goes around. That's going to create a spin that's going to give you a vortex on the top and bottom. So now you're going to have something that'll actually get you the correct form. That's going to be at least 4 fields in there, maybe possibly 5 if you consider the rotation here and the turn on that first one to be 2 different ones. Then what you're going to need to do is you're going to have to put frequency in it. You're going to have to put harmonics in it. Then you're going to have to go over and do the Russell scale in it. Then it's going to form a little bit of, woo stuff we're not allowed to talk about on this channel. And then now you just start. That's the basis of what it is at the most simplest form. Now, what does it do when you get it put together? That's the thing. And how do you direct everything to get the differences that you want?
Yeah, that's exactly where I wanted to go with this, and it goes back to the what comes up all the time, which is if you have one and you have control of it, then you sort of have access to them all. They all work off of the same principles, and I think the most unique binding characteristic is the need for rotation. And that kind of goes without saying, that because it's that rotation in space that also accesses and binds it with the time, and that's where the resonance and the frequency comes in. The entire thing runs off of energy and pressure differentials.
Mm-hmm.
And the effects that you get are really based on the gradient of the energy interaction with other energy and matter within the system. And that's really the manifest of it all. The observable that you get out of it is really contingent on where in the gradient it is and how much of a gradient there is. Once the offsets become the offset differentials become so great, where you have power densities, matter densities that are in excess and meet at a high point, there's less of a gradient and more of a direct reaction. It's that direct reaction that leads to the more exotic, the more exotic phenomena that are observable.
So let's go a little bit of woo here and give a little information that's inside. You're not only going to have to create pressure, you're going to have to create hot and cold.
Mm-hmm.
So on the outside of the magnetic field, you expect it to be hot. Okay, we all know it. Put the amps in, it gets hot. On the inside, you want it to be cool. Now, you say, well, why is that? Just because the difference in where the air is? No, not necessarily. It's the rotation of the field. The rotation of the field itself will pull in that cold from the outside through the center. That's kind of one of the things you know when you start to have this. If you don't have it, it won't do it. So if you do have it, that's when it starts. Now, based on that temperature difference, you're going to start to get that vortex on the top and bottom. So what's so cool about this is you talk about the pressure. Well, the pressure comes in right after you get the hot and cold. You flow from the hot side to the cold side. Then you start getting the pressure in the center. So remember that list you had, Joe?
I do.
And you started out with nothing in the center,
Mhm.
and then you went to a small frequency. Can
Mhm.
you kind of go over that list a little bit so that we can all understand?
Yeah, sure. So just right off the top of my head, since I made it up anyway, all the way at the top, you have an absolute. So it's just absolute still.
Mhm.
And then for reasons we will not get into, a disturbance of that absolute still leads to a second plane, okay, of potential. And that potential is more or less scalar, ether, net. It's transverse frequencies, and just a potential for frequencies. And that layer of it lies just beyond Planck's distance. Okay, so basically that there's no time in that in that layer of things. Now, once enough of these potential waveforms then interact with each other, they then have frequency, and it's then that once you have a frequency to the transverse waveform, now you're starting to play with the fundamentals of all energy creation and all matter creation as it transcends down.
That has to do with the Russell scale and where you end up in creating things. So, all right, we keep hearing about matter. So let me explain this for people. The reason we say scalar inside the center of this thing instead of plasma, and there's a reason. Most people would think of plasma, if you think of high voltage, as simply the purple that comes out. Well, that'd be the wrong state of plasma. That's not the one we're looking for. We're looking for like a scalar type plasma. Same thing that would be around a cell in your body inside the blood cell or something like that. That's what we're looking for. Something that has to do with something like that. Now, what we want to do in this is create matter out of it.
If I may, real quick on that, Nathan.
Yeah.
With and correct me if I'm wrong. Of course, please. But like when you're talking about that type of plasma being the non-visual type, I mean, the easy way to put it would be like a plasmatic field.
Okay, I can go with that.
In my opinion, at least, the manifest of plasmatically charged field would be the fact that it's diffuse in gradient with either another energetic field or matter. Okay, but not enough that there's discharge over. So there's no visual, see, because once that plasma field is condensed enough and the offset is much greater than that of its environment around it, at that point it'll start creating other phenomena that's associated with what we would consider to be plasma as you see it, usually photon energy and light. So it's it's that charge state in gradient, either not in direct relationship with other energy fields or intermingling with, but not enough to actually create the plasmatic discharges.
So let's just say this: the discharge is a waste of energy.
Mhm.
It's an absolute killer for the system. As soon as you discharge energy in one of these systems, you have a failure. So the idea is you want the energy to build up and build up and build up inside the field, but you never want to discharge it. You see, it's not the effect you're looking for. That's not the end goal here. The effects come in other parts of it. This is simply just a building of the field. So if you have discharge in the building of it, your field fails.
Yeah, I mean, in order for that to be optimized, so to speak, you need a form of alternative pressure against the system that's acting upon it and keeping it compressed. That's realistically what it is, so it could reach a form of saturation without that discharge.
Yeah, so that's kind of the main thing, though, when you do this. It's a point of saturation. See, I don't think people really understand that. They think you could just build this thing out of a couple circuits. It just doesn't work that way. You have to understand field dynamics in order to get it to work. You have to build 4 fields immediately. You start one, the other ones have to start like right afterwards. As soon as the first one's primed, the other ones have to start, or else you fail. It's not an easy process by any means. But if you can get it to go, then you have to wait and let it discharge anything else that's in the surrounding area. That's one of the hardest things because you need the saturation, right? So you get the saturation, things purge from the system. Now, what happens after that? One of the first effects you're going to find when you start creating this is your entire room becomes the enclosed area. Now, wherever you're at, it's cavitation. So if you charge the outside wall, so you have pipes running through it and that's your ground, you literally made your room the bubble. That's it. So now you're in this bubble. One of the effects of this is time dilation. So you have to watch what you're doing. If you set a clock in your room when this is on, you go outside and set a clock the same. No digital, you look at mechanical. Now you have to wonder if you're going to get a time dilation field in this if you created the correct environment in the room. So what does it mean when it's correct environment? There's going to be energy everywhere. I mean, literally everywhere because you're in it. You're not outside of it looking in. You are literally in it. That means you're in the time dilation field. So when you look at the Earth and you look at the fields that come off of it, every single one of them is a time dilation field. So by the time you get to space, you have a difference between that time and the time that you're standing on the Earth. That's the same thing we're creating here.
Now, in your scenario that you're describing, it's my opinion at least that if you're the one standing in the room where it's becoming saturated and therefore you're in a potential of time dilation, if you're not in resonance with the charge in the room, that's the mechanism of the time dilation, that could actually, your body would either has to do one of two things. You're going to either have to fall into some sort of sympathetic resonance with the external environment because you're just along for the ride at that point, or you're not going to fall into sympathetic resonance with it, which means that your internal workings, I mean, I'm not going to go far into this obviously for reason, but your internal workings are working off of a different timeline, so to speak, than the rest. So having the resonance and everything being in tune with your own personal self would, in my opinion, be pretty critical in that scenario, or else you might have adverse effect.
So let's go there a little bit. When we talk about meditation, Joe, and you say this all the time, you have to be good with yourself or spiritually pure. So would you like to explain that? Because that's exactly what you have to be in order to be in sympathetic resonance.
Sure. So, in order really to be able to experience the higher realms of any sort of meditative state, you need to be able to find yourself at some kind of equilibrium and 0 point yourself. If you're too far in either direction, it's very hard to pull yourself into a state of being that allows for any success in meditative and spiritual processes, just because you're too far off that midpoint. There's some people that say that if you experience certain things, and you're feeling not so well, in your own self, and you have a lot of baggage that's kind of coming along with you, that could affect negatively the experience that you have in those higher states. It's really my opinion that when you're in those lower levels of vibration yourself, really you just become more prohibited from actually being able to attain it in the first place, to have experienced negative effect, so to speak, in your experience. But what I will say is that from talking to people, at least, and watching material on it, I don't really have a lot of firsthand experience here, but when it comes to like psychedelics and stuff like that, if you are in one of those lower vibrational states and you induce a higher vibrational state, at that point you're forcing the process, and that there's a lack of equilibrium there, and that's a lot of negative consequence potentially that the person that's going through that experience could have. And it's no different really than what we're talking about right here, as far as it meeting that resonance. It's a learned skill, and I think anyone could do it. As far as putting these other systems into resonance and everything like that, it's all trial and error, just like in real life with the meditation.
Now, let me explain why this is important. Because the ether itself causes transmutation, if you're not in the correct resonance, you could have a bad transmutation or you can have a good one. It really depends on which state you're in. I know for some of you out there that may sound a little far-fetched, but I'm telling you that when you're in this field, either you're harmonious with it and you feel good, or you absolutely cannot be in that room. Right. So it's one or the other. And I can tell you this, it's based on the mood that you're in. It's based on how your body flows. If you're actually good with things. I don't do these tests if I'm in a bad mood. It just doesn't work that way, because I've been in the room where it's absolutely, I can't stand it. I have to shut it off and run out, and I just cannot be in there. So
you always got to meet it where it's at. Is sort of right. That's sort of the moral to the story. There's nothing like turning your gold into lead,
Yeah. So we're starting to learn a little bit about the ether itself and what it does. So we know it has the Russell scale in it. We know it has tones in there. It has octaves in there. So why are those things important? Well, you're creating the harmony of a planet when you're basically creating an ether, or the harmony of a universe. So you're going to have every single part of it in there. Now, you're going to have to build it in there. So when you don't have those type of things in there, it's deconstructive, and which basically means you're either running hot energy through everything, you don't have the cold side perfected, you're creating plasmoids where they don't belong, you're starting to get ill effects in there, you're starting to create resonance that makes you sick, and it's a really disturbing trend when you start to look at this, exactly why it works this way. Also, if you do not have the hot and cold side worked out, it's going to be an ugly day. It's going to be a real ugly day. That's why we do things at real low power in this. That's one of the misnomers of all this. People say, well, you need 1,000,000 volts. No, not at all. You could probably do it for under 24 volts. And it's if you know the cold side of energy. You see, I've been showing these Tesla coils, and I've been showing you the cold side of energy for a reason. it works differently. So when you say it's hot energy, you're pushing energy out, therefore you need more of it. But when you're dealing with cold energy, you're pulling the energy through it. So you need less of it because by the area that you put hot and cold in, you're making the flow. Now that you're making the flow itself that creates in the vortexes is taking over everything. That's going to be the energy there. It's going to pick up by itself. You don't need to add the extra energy. It's adding it for you. You have to worry about a runaway state when you're too far in resonance when you're building this. There's a total difference in how the system is working. You see, when you're creating hot energy or hot plasmoids everywhere, then yeah, pump it through 1,000,000 volts and go for it and pray it doesn't come near you. But when you're dealing with cold energy, you start to have a little more control. There's less voltage in it. There's less chance for failure. You're now able to move the hot side where you want it. You can add things and remove things from the system in order to control where everything goes.
Yeah, I mean, attaining any kind of success with any of these exotic phenomena that, go hand in hand with this, really has to do with bifurcation of the duality that exists in gradient locally. So, positive charges and negative charges, and hot and cold. And, it's really kind of got to be separate, every function separate to themselves and working on their own side of things, like you're kind of saying, and actually working in unison in a rotational manner. It's that rotational and toroidal manner. It's not only the spin, because and I you always like to say this. What I don't think people understand maybe is the visual in your head, because it is so complicated to understand what the movement of all of this is. If you take yourself and you remove yourself out of time space and then kind of are looking at time space, you're talking about a rotational vortice that's also toroidal, where the inside is out and the inside is in at any given time. It's such a complicated movement and flow to have to get your head around, because it's just not simply something that really exists in the realm that we experience. Well, I mean, it exists everywhere in the realm that we experience, but not in a visual perception.
I guess the way to say it is the field on the outside, the toroidal field, it has to be powerful enough to create a tornado on the top and bottom. Is basically what you're looking for. You need to be able to create the spin on that tornado, top and bottom, north and south. You need to create a dipole in here. All these things are important when you do this in order to control it. So when you talk about the pressure needed by that toroidal, that's why I say it has to move in a direction, but it also has to come over. That area that comes over like that and it spins like this.
It's twisting around and sucking in, twisting around and sucking in. But that's only at the local point. You see, what if you're talking about this, in the larger picture of things, it's all that now that thing that's twisting around and sucking in and out, okay, is a bullet that's shot out of a gun moving forward. And then while it's moving forward, it's also orbiting. So it's spinning and sucking in and moving forward and orbiting simultaneously. That's what this is. That's what these processes are.
Well, not just that, it's recycling the energy throughout the room. So when you say my room's full of static electricity, well, every time it goes in and goes through the center, right? And it pulls it in. So in those tornadoes, right? It's pulling in the energy down through it in the center of it. So as it spins this way, it's a counter spin on the inside that pulls it in, right? So as it goes, it fills in the room, but it also exits out the bottom. So now it's coming through and it's building. And every time it goes around, it charges more of the air, more of the air, more of the air until your entire room is filled. The entire room is filled with energy. If you have a bunch of light bulbs around here that are fluorescent, you'll start seeing them go off 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way around your room at different distances. And you're going, oh my, I better turn off everything because it's really going now.
All right. Woo time. Hold on. Woo time. So, I mean, I did see videos circulating that both in Europe and in the United States, there's been multiple instances of people reporting street lights literally going on and off in like what appears to be a sequence. It's mind-blowing. And it's like, and it's not only street lights, it's also like lights on buildings and stuff like that are in the, it's a proximity thing. So it's literally just lighting up all these halogen lamps, you know, and it's not doing it like randomly or all at the same time. It's literally cycling from 1 on, 2 on, 1 off, 3 on, and then like that. Like that's its synchronicity.
Because everything's in a pulse field. It's not in a static field. There's no way that can happen. It has to happen in a pulse
It's
field.
got to have movement, right?
Yeah. So think about it this way. If you have the Russell scale coming out of the top and bottom of this thing, it's going to be going, you know, up and down like this. So you're going to have a pulsed area in it. Now, the crazier part about this is now you're going to have the formation of matter from the energy. So Gerald says that it's light producing the energy. Well, light has to come from producing the plasma state first. So
all right. Do you remember that thing that I just said about the whole movement and then it being shot out of a gun? That whole thing. Okay.
Yeah, go for it.
You know what I just realized, and I think it kind of broke my head a little bit, and I feel like in the back of my head I knew this, but like visualizing it, I don't think I ever did. Is all what I just described at that macro level, all that is a waveform.
Yeah.
It's both a transverse and a frequency wave form movement. That's exactly what that movement is. So you know, and it's like I said, it's not like I never had that thought or knew that. It's just that I never quite visualized it that way, and it's like, oh. So you break a waveform, and then you compress a bunch of waveforms together. It starts doing its own thing, but in reality, what it's actually doing is just being another waveform.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
So you have to look at what matter actually is. You see, we look at things and we say, okay, that's a rock. That's water, right? We generally forget that they're all made of atoms. And it's the combination and compression of atoms that gives you matter. So when you look at that, you go, okay, well, that makes it pretty simple. Where are atoms at? Well, they're in everything. So when you get to creating this stuff, you have to understand this system is breaking down everything to an atomic level, then rebuilding it. And when it rebuilds it in a form of matter. That's where the Russell scale comes in, because now, depending on what the frequency, tone, all that stuff, right? All the octaves that they say in there in that scale, depending on that is what your matter comes out as. That's really what it is. So this isn't just, hey, let's create a wormhole to go over here, or hey, let's create this, you know what I mean, plasmoid. You're dealing with the fundamentals of nature themselves. You're dealing with, hey, this is something out of our league. We're going from type 1 civilization to type 3 immediately when you do this. So it becomes a very scary thing if you put it in someone in the wrong hands. Then it becomes something that you do not want discovered.
Yeah. What you just said and like what I was just thinking about just kind of melded together, and then I just had one of those like ahas. Like when it comes to um disappearing something, and snapping something out of this dimensional reality, um if you have high enough charge states of a single type of charge, like a negative charge, let's say, and you have that in proximity to something that has the opposite charge, because the opposites attract, and you have such a high density in one spot, you'd actually be sucking the charge off of whatever came to be. And then there would come a point in time where the equilibrium would be reached from that high charge state. But if it was able to be utilizing etheric, aether energy, it would actually, that would just manifest its own cascading growth, which would still maintain a higher differential to avoid that equilibrium. And then what would end up happening is there would end up being a pole swap potentially. And once there's a pole swap with a high density energy charge and objects or matter in an area, I think that pole swap would disappear.
Yeah.
I think that once it crosses, like it's like the pendulum, there's a point in time where it's not moving. And when you hit that, then you cross Planck's. And once you cross Planck's and you reach a 0 point of time, space, and charge, then you cease to exist.
So when you say going through like a doorway, would you, or like a Stargate or something, would you say it'd be instantaneous? Kind of like a scalar field, when you go in one side, you're automatically touching the other side?
There'd have to be charge exchange for long enough for that to take place. But once that charge exchange does take place and the pole swap, there's going to be that point of crossing, which would be on the other side of Planck's distance. And it would be at that pinnacle of a moment that the cessation would occur. Basically, okay. ripped out of time space, or stood still in time space. So you're here and everything else is just going around you.
So a question for you. So we'll compare a wormhole versus a like a Stargate from point to point.
Fair.
So from point to point, you would probably go through at a general speed, right? That may not tear you apart. But in a wormhole, is it controllable? See, that's the thing. Can you control the speed in that, or does it open something naturally on the other side where it's already controlled and your whatever craft you're in or yourself stops movement and it's pulled through at its own rate and slowed back down at its own rate when it drops out?
Well, I mean, speed is relative, right? So I think that if you enter into a wormhole, and I think maybe that's where a little misconception occurs, is like proven science will say, well, we could open up a wormhole, but they immediately collapse. Now, I mean, if that wormhole were big enough, even if it was just enough to enter it, you'd be out the other side before the collapse. Just simply because once you cross over Planck's distance, the time in our realm of measurement, it was almost instantaneous. But once you cross over that, it's an indefinite. You have no time to concern yourself with what time to get out the other side. And then also because you'd be entering into it, I think that the mechanism that does move time would still be an application on your movement. So the time it would take you to go from one to another would be the smallest sum of measurable time at Planck's distance. So you'd basically instantaneously be put through it. For intents and purposes, it would be instantaneous as far as I think if you want to say it's a person, the person's perspective would be, or a watch's perspective would be. It would be less than a tick on a watch.
Okay.
Far less.
So let's see if we can look at some kind of parallel. There was a guy over there in the Bermuda Triangle flying an airplane, right? It was a single engine plane, and he was making the trip back to Miami, Florida. He encountered what seemed to be a sideways tornado in the air. Before he knew it, he was pulled into it. He had traveled over 3,000 miles in half the time, a quarter of the time it would have normally taken him. So he said it was basically like floating. It pulled him in, it took him, and pushed him out the other side. Huh?
This took place in Florida?
Yeah, right from the Bermuda Triangle going to Florida. So that's the story. All right.
Florida man gets sucked through horizontal tornado and ends up 3,000 miles away.
I'm just saying. He said his fuel was like he traveled a quarter of the distance. So.
Well, that means he had an empty tank because I doubt his car got that kind of economy.
It was an airplane.
Oh, an airplane.
Yeah.
Oh, it was an airplane. Oh.
He didn't just jump in a freaking tornado.
I was going to say, I guess he ran out of gas along the way, but still kept going.
Anyway.
Okay. Yeah,
it's a fairly well-known story. So, based on that, if we assume that it's true, okay, that's assuming it's true. Now, what he experienced was that the field itself was built and that he went through the eye of the storm, and in the eye of the storm, it pulled him through to the other side without him doing anything. So, I guess what I would like to know is if that's true, is the amount of energy consistent with the amount of time that he spent inside of the vortex. So if the energy in that surrounding area gave him that many miles of distance based on the energy, then outside in the universe, if you have a wormhole, would it pull you through that much faster? And would you be safe to go through?
I don't think anything to do with any of this stuff is necessarily safe. It's just a matter of how, you gotta be able to know what does it and control it before you can really make commentary on safe. But okay, provided that it's true. I mean, I think that any sort of phenomena like that could really only be okay. Suppose, right? Suppose that the mechanism of the creation of said vortex was ball lightning. Okay. For sense and purpose of what we're discussing, that would probably make the most sense. Right. I would say that where it ends up, and the only way that the ball lightning would be able to form that is if it had an entangled pair. So if the ball lightning splits off into two and then goes somewhere else, then that would potentially act as where you would end up. And how fast he goes through it or whatever, what the mechanism of that would be. I mean, man, this stuff is so speculative that I don't even really have commentary.
Well, I'm just asking. There's no right answer to it right now.
It is,
So, let me explain something real quick. We watched Ashton Forbes and we watched The Plane, right?
Yeah.
And we've all seen the ball lightning out there, and he says the plane gets sucked backwards. Well, why? did you see the direction that the orbs are going in?
Mhm.
Like this, but
Yeah,
they're
they're going
going
in a
in.
clockwise. Yeah, clockwise formation.
So if I told you that would mean that right behind it would be your ether point, and that the vortex goes this way, that means that behind the plane is where your ether point is. The eye of the storm puts you here. You're creating with the plasmoids the vortex. It's an artificial vortex. So now you're sucked backwards through the time. What does that mean for your plane? Well, you may be experiencing time dilation field in that. So you may not be in the correct timeline going through that.
Yeah, and that's one thing that we don't really know what that means to not be in the correct timeline of something. Like, we don't know if not being in the correct timeline just means that it appeared, or I'm sorry, in reverse time dilation. Like, you might actually be in a totally separate situation entirely um than you exited. Like, there may be very few world similarities, or very similar but different, or very Mandela effect type situations, while this reality just continued along without you. um or whatever. I mean, that's quite possible. Or, I mean, if it's put back on the same timeline, that makes it even stranger, because then there could be a series of events that still happen, but just happen earlier than whatever. So then that becomes very paradoxical.
Well, I could say this. How do I say it? Energy doesn't understand time the way we perceive time. So pushing something back 30, 40, 70 years is no problem for energy. We can't perceive it because we don't understand energy right. The one fundamental thing that we know is AC and DC, and that's all man-made. We have yet to find out what the energy of the earth is. We can speculate in crystal and all this stuff and piezoelectricity, but we're not there yet. I hear a lot of people say static electricity, but is it? Because we're creating fields and stuff that is not consistent with static electricity. So,
Well, that's interesting you say that, because and that actually makes sense, because um energy is closer to source, than matter is. So when energy enters into a state of low density, or and it basically everything dissipates with time. It just simply is. So even though it can't be destroyed, if it reaches such a low state of entropy, or high state of entropy, whatever, um realistically, it could find itself in a situation where it becomes on the other side of Planck's distance again, and then no longer subject. It's still at that point. It becomes potential, and once it's potential, then it could return to um, no time being a factor at all. Whereas matter has a more difficult time achieving that, naturally. Sort of one of those things.
so the question has to be asked: can you still create a time like a wormhole without the ether? Is it simply just a vortex that pulls things through with a vortex on the other side without the rest of it? Is that
Well, I mean,
possible?
the way that I believe the ether to be, nothing exists without the ether. So, I mean, no. I mean, that's a very simple thing. I mean, if ether ceases to exist, then all the pressure differentials fall apart. The pieces literally just go like, you know, like fall into no separation, total randomness.
Well, it's kind of an interesting question, only because when you think about it, if you have the ball lightning and it's spinning in a vortex, how did you create the ether in the middle of it? So, or like I said, did you just break the energy that's going on in the earth and pull yourself into a field where there's maybe nothing, and then you come out the other side, or instantaneously come out the other side at that same random energy point that the earth had at one time?
I think of ether different than you do. Maybe because the way that like you said, and you say it all the time, and it's just a matter of crunching words, which I don't like to do. But like, I don't think anybody's creating ether nothing, like or simulating an ether. It's simply utilizing the fabric of everything that holds everything else together and separating locality within that ether. That's what I believe, to be the case. And by continuously disturbing the stillness of etheric energy, you could continuously entice its the manifest of its observable properties. That's how I perceive it to be. So, like, locality is a very real thing within ether. Locality has everything to do with its interaction with the surrounding environment, and the way to break localities is by creating a large differential of different energy types, which would gradient out, but there would have to be planes of high pressure, high density energy, or matter. Could be matter too. But so yeah, I mean, I really can't say on what you're saying, just because I don't think we are creating ether.
Well, I look at more in the mechanical sense of how we're building stuff versus, theory on how things work. It's like, so for instance, Victor Schauberger built the airplane, or he wanted to build an airplane, I should say, that actually created the vortex. And the vortex was supposed to suck the plane through it versus, forcing the way through it. So instead of going in the positive direction, which was the airplane pushing through something, he went in the negative energy spectrum, where he wanted to create a vortex in order to pull the airplane through, using less energy in the end. So in that instance, I wouldn't say that there was an ether created at all. I would say that he was creating a vortex and making a field. So, and that's kind of the mechanical side of where I look at it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I understand that. I mean, I think a good analogy for it, at least in the way that I think about it, would be like sort of like a centrifuge. If you have the vial that your liquid or materials is going into, the vial and the liquid that's in it as a substrate, I mean, not the substrate, but the medium, so to speak, right, would be like equivalent to the ether in that circumstance, whereas your solid particulate that will be separated out or joined back together depending on what the environment around it's doing. That's sort of how I believe ether to be, is like the liquid that everything is separated out from. But it's that same liquid that allows for it to be sorted. It is also the same one that allows for it to float. It allows for it to dissolve. It's all like similar to that circumstance, I think.
Okay. So let's go back to like the garage experiment.
Sure.
And we're just creating the ether. So when we look at the Russell scale, we notice like maybe, what is it, copper and gold? You're just missing something in there in the middle, and then you need to add it. And in order to do that, you have to bond it. Well, bonding it, you're going to have to break it down a little bit, aren't you? So if you broke it down to an atomic level as you spun it, like you said, what happens to it? Well, then you add the correct parts to put in it to make gold instead of copper.
Mm-hmm.
And And I haven't looked at the Russell scale, so please don't quote me on if those two line up, but I'm pretty sure that they're close. But that's all it's doing is it's putting things in the correct format the right way. So you could say, well, we could break this down in another way, right? And you want to do it like Bedini did it. And he takes a rock and breaks it down to a chemical form and then, turns it into a ruby. Well, that's good, but it's still synthetic. You see, this way you're creating pure, the right thing through it.
Yeah, I mean, I understand what you're saying, and I agree with that. The only thing that I've always been a little, and it's only maybe because I haven't seen it myself to really understand it. You mentioned it before, but when Bendini turned that that into a ruby, that just doesn't make sense to me.
You never watched the video?
I have my reasons.
Okay.
But yeah, that doesn't make sense to me.
We'll have to show you the Bedini video.
I want, yeah. We'll have to watch that at some point. But yeah, my reason for that, and I'm not going to go deep into it, but is that you can transmute XYZ into its separate components and bring it back together. The only thing is that there's certain mechanisms that have to exist in order for a crystal form like ruby to be formed. And like, for instance, in ruby's case, not only would you need aluminum oxide and chromium, in order to make a ruby, that's fine. Yeah, you could organize it however, that's fine. But that's still not going to make a crystal ruby. The heat is the defining factor of that.
Oh, he baked it.
Yeah.
No, he definitely baked it.
I have to see it, I guess. Call me a skeptic.
I said the same thing before I watched it. So it's just interesting the way that things come together. Now, people talked about making synthetic gold, and what's the problem? Is Bedini said it himself, doesn't work. There's something missing there. One of the elements is missing, and that's why it has to be broken down the right way, spun the right way, and mutated the right way. So, like you're saying, in the ruby, you think there's something missing. In the gold, when you do it, there's something missing. So, does it appear like gold and transmutate back to copper because you have a missing element? You see, that's what I'm saying. But in the ether itself, when you start to create this stuff, it creates it the correct way. That's why some of this stuff they don't want out. They don't want this information out on this. If you knew how to create it, you could create anything you want. That's why I say you jump from type 1 to type 3. You know what I mean? You're going to be controlling whatever you want in space. You don't need to harness the power of the sun. You harness the power of the ether in your own locality.
Yeah. Now, I actually want to clarify something I said, and
go ahead.
Which kind of bridges the gap a little bit. You can create, under the same exact circumstances of what I described the ether as being, you can create artificial circumstances that are not ether,
mm-hmm.
that replicate ether.
Yes.
And for instance, like that's one big reason why water is such a fascinating thing, is because water quite directly is capable of emulating ether energy because of and it's visible and tangible, because you can imagine pressure differentials. What the difference is when you take a piece of styrofoam at the surface that floats on top, but you drag it down to the bottom, and the piece of styrofoam that's this big is this big at the bottom. You could see the tangible effect of pressure differential in that. A gas will float up to the top, and create a low pressure orb in it, which because of that pressure differential, it's visible in there. It's exactly how ether works. is that same exact way. It's just, a visual representation, but could also be more than a visual representation. It could be the medium for, basically simulating, ether, atmospherically. Sure.
Okay, so let me switch a little bit here. I'm going for the ether. Let's go to the fields. Now, when you create these fields, remember I told you it's in cavitation, so we know we're in the room, right? Well, we also have fields inside that room that go within each other. So we generally think of it as one field, right? But that's not the way it's going to work. You're going to have a field on the outside, but you're also going to have an inner field kind of rotating inside that field. And it's just going to work that way. So that's why there's time dilation between one field and the next field. You see, every time you create those fields, you're going to have a time dilation. You're also going to have a frequency difference.
Mm-hmm.
So as you start to pull them apart, you'll start to notice that. Now, what's the great thing about the electrons that we learn? One charge one way, one charge the other way. So now, as you understand cavitation, we start to look at it in the earth. We go, okay, boom, we have one field this way. Boom, we have another field this way. And it'll start to build out. So do we know which side's positive and negative when it comes to our atmosphere? You see, because that's a strange thing. We think it's always negative on the bottom and positive on the top. Yet, which one's the weaker field? Well, the closest field to the center would be the stronger one, right? So that means the one the further out is weaker. But does it change and flip based on the pressure differential? So we know that we go in space, everybody wants to put everything in a vacuum, right? Well, what does that mean for the Earth? The Earth is not in a vacuum, not in that way. It's in a pressurized field. So we're forcing pressure out, meaning a vacuum that comes in, creating that field to be thicker and stronger. So does it flip the field?
I mean, it could. I mean, it could. Yeah, I mean, when you leave Earth's atmosphere and you enter into the, wants it to be in a vacuum. I mean, I don't really buy that whole vacuum situation because I find it to be counterintuitive because unfortunately, once any sort of matter or energy enters into your vacuum, it's no longer a vacuum. Unless if you rip the fabric of the ether, creating the vacuum. And not saying that's not possible.
Well,
not saying that's not possible.
it just could be a pressure differential. It doesn't have to be a vacuum. That's what they generally call it.
Okay, so a major offset pressure differential.
Yeah.
I could see where you're going there. Sure. It could have flipped up. Yeah, I mean, theoretically, I suppose it could. Is it? I don't know.
So
I mean,
let me just bring you the anti-gravity world for a little bit. The whole idea is to flip the field. If you can flip the field, so think of what we're standing on as like a dielectric plane or a center plate, if you will, in between an anode and a cathode in your saturated field is what it is. So the reason I asked earlier about the flip is if you know it's stronger towards the inside, if you rotate a magnet, the field obviously on the inside is stronger than the outside. Okay. We know we have a magnetosphere. So is it possible that the outside got to a positive state instead of a negative state because we're on that plane where we flip the field? You see, that's the strange thing about it all. It should be that the positive is on the bottom and the negative's on the top. So going towards the atmosphere, right? But that's not the way it's working. It's working at the positive there. So we had to, in order to get that, we had to take the field in it and flip it permanently, just like we would in an electric. We had to change that field.
So let me ask you this. Now, this kind of goes back to many, many episodes ago that we had when we were talking about planet formation and just the electromagnetic fields of planets and its relationship to the sun and radiation and all that stuff. That's where I'm going back to. Okay.
Okay.
So if that flip occurs, okay, and the ionization, the plasmatic ionization that occurs in the gradient zones between Earth's magnetic sphere, okay, and the incoming, magnetism and radiation of the sun in our instance, okay? How does that charge shift or flip affect that gradient?
It's, I'll say it.
Because our shift doesn't necessarily mean the incoming shift. So now you have a charge shift that would have a, you know, it would change the equation of what, not only what our magnetic, um, you know, uh, field is on Earth, but also just like what the interaction between Earth and the sun would be in that circumstance.
Because you need a charged field out there that's positive in order to bring in the negative that's pushed off by the sun. You see, the sun's always going to be the positive. You can't change that. What it pushes out is the negative. So in order to get that radiation to stay in that barrier, they have to be charged differently in order to make it attract. That's why they stay in that field. So when you look at the Van Allen belt, does the radiation leave the field? See, that's the interesting thing. It stays right there. So there must be some positive and negative interaction in order to pull the fields together, right? Because if they were the same, it would pass right through it, or you know what I mean, saturate and pull it into your planet. It's not doing that.
Yeah, that's where I was going with that. Is like that wouldn't make much sense. So okay, that makes sense. So that would be the barrier, so to speak.
Well, see, that's the whole reason for the flipping of the field, though.
Okay.
You see, you flip the field so you can have the positive on the outside because it should be negative.
Right.
It should not be a positive out there. Not in the general way that it works, not unless you had the field on the Earth that flipped it. So when you want to look at a UFO, the main thing to do this is it's like a heavy lifter. Build a lifter that will not lift off the ground. Put a flat bottom on it. You know what I mean? Put the wire on the top. Absolutely should not lift. How do you get it to lift? You charge the aluminum and then you flip the field. That's how you get it to lift. It has nothing to do with ion wind at that point. It's way too heavy.
No, and it doesn't.
Yeah, 2.4 meters per second will not get you off the ground when you have a heavy lifter. So you don't even have the right sides to pull off ion wind when you have that because you have a flat plate on the bottom of aluminum. The only way to do that is to flip the charge on the flat plate in order for it to go up. Now you're taking a small item and you're forcing it to have a large item pull towards it. Now you have no problem lifting it because it's creating that pressure. So let me put this in another way. If I were to take static electricity and put it on a sock and I put it on the table, it sticks to the table, right? If you could create a charged field on the table, it sticks right to it, right? Because they're like charges. Boom, sticks to it, okay? You start sticking it, so then you go to your shirt. You put it on your shirt, it stays on your shirt, right? You ever had that? That sock that won't come off, that wants to stay there? Well, that's the same thing. It's a pressure. So when you get into static electricity, they're creating a pressure on it. Well, in this, you're doing it with the actual charge versus the static electricity. The static electricity is a means to an end. It is not the final product you're looking for. You're looking for that charge state to split.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I get that. I mean, listen, once you get something lifted up and you have that bubble field and everything like that, because you have a charge on the outside of it, going almost indefinitely fast, even in atmosphere, becomes like almost comical because really all you have to do is throw an opposite charge field, thin opposite charge field, just outside the scope of the bubble, and it's just going to constantly rip itself toward that projected field indefinitely fast and indefinitely until you stop it.
So check this out. You've seen the bridges sway like really heavily, right?
Yeah.
It'd be, a frequency gets into them, whether there be a bunch of cars or a bunch of people.
The marching bridge or whatever, that concept, marching bridge.
So that's not exactly anti-gravity, but it's a fundamental part of anti-gravity. You see, you have to break the field that it's in first. That's one of the main things. You have to break that field, but you can't break a field without a locality. So you have to have the bubble. The bubble itself is what allows you to break the field inside of it in order to lift something. See, otherwise it'd just be a swaying bridge. Well, the bridge only sways is because there's 2 points right here, right?
2 points, yep, holding it.
Yeah. But when you get something sitting on the ground, it isn't going to do that. It's just going to sit there, right? So you could be out of the thing and not even know it. You see, that's kind of the thing. Now, how do we know when we go to create anti-gravity? It's that slight turn to the left.
I was going to say, I mean, it just because it's on the ground doesn't mean that it's, I mean, if you have something that's building resonance and it's out of resonance, the thing is going to shake. That's what it's like having a unbalanced wheel, or the same concept is like a vibrator. Women.
Wow.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
So that, and I can't even say it with a straight face. All right. Basically, what you're looking for is for that thing to have that turning ability. Okay. Like you said, that vibrator's got to be rocking in order for this thing to work. Okay. So,
ever see one of them things on a table?
Go in there, Joe.
It grew legs. Anyway, I digress.
Anyway, well, I don't think what people understand is we do it as little bubbles because we're rotating stuff, right? But when you don't rotate stuff and you have a cavitation in your room becomes the field in which you're playing in. That's what Hutchinson knew. He created the field inside the room. So when you do it in a big vacant warehouse, guess what you get? Absolutely zero, because you have no cavitation. You see, his little apartment got filled up with energy real quick. Now his fields change. Okay? That's the simple of it. Once he knew he got that thing to move a little bit, then by the frequency it was in, it could take off. Now, what is one of the keys to what he did that people don't really realize? He wasn't just building simple, how do I say it? Like quartz fields or things like that. That crystal made a big difference. And in testing it, when you do it with an ultrasound machine, just understand this. It doubles on both sides. Whatever the cold energy field is, will double. The hot energy field will not be affected. So, where do I know he's working in? I already know he's working in cold energy. I already know he used the crystal form. I already know that he's moving stuff. Why? Because plasmoids and stuff like that can occur inside metals when you use cold electricity with far less voltage than it would be with hot electricity.
Right. Just like, cold energy and plasmoids like to do. They like to dematerialize and destabilize molecular structure because it's basically a white hole principle at that point.
Yeah.
Or a black hole principle, whatever the case. It's whatever it is, it's breaking molecular bonds and letting metal twist and become putty and all that fun stuff.
Well, that's why
brilliant, man.
Yeah, it tears from the inside out. So it's not tearing from the outside in. So he must have created something in the center of it, didn't he? So was he able to direct it is what I'd like to know about his work is did he get to the point of controlling where it starts and where it goes in? See, because there's a lot of people out there that want to control this system. There's very few that can. We know Gerald can. Okay, I can tell you, that guy knows everything about this subject, and it's you got to understand this. It's 12 years of research into that field, like with a literally built machine that works.
Yeah. I wish I could have 10 minutes with John Hutchinson personally, because I have a bunch of questions to ask him.
Yeah.
Because one thing that I personally feel like, in my observations and sort of how I believe things to be, if you have that type of dematerialization and the breaking down in the molecular structure of metals like that, what I think is that there's got to be a condensation of the dematerialized matter somewhere, and that whatever is transmuted and changed within the metal material itself that's left behind, that it has entangled particles that are condensed somewhere else. And I mean, if I had to guess, I'd probably say that it was from like from point of propagation. So it's possible that there's accumulation on the energy source input of some sort, even if it's just skim at the molecular level. I mean, that's kind of just where my mind goes. But the interesting thing about that is whether there is or isn't, even if it's just airborne and just like whatever, I feel that's a mechanism of entanglement.
So, you've ever seen the video of him on the lake?
No.
In the water?
Or maybe I have, and I just don't know which one you're talking about, but it doesn't come to mind.
He was looking in order to clean up the lake or river he was on, and he's messing with the dial in order to change the frequency on it. So, what do you think he was looking for when he did that? I mean, think about it for a minute. We talked about the Russell scale. We talked about the frequency. We talked about the octaves. And here he is trying to clean a river with it.
I mean, he's looking for the resonant frequency probably of the water to be able to, have a, what do you call it, like an ultrasonic cleaner effect almost on the water, and just have everything precipitate out.
So the only way you know that is if you build it. The only way you're looking for that particular thing is if you built it. So we know that's part of his system.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? We already know what's in there. And from testing, we know what's in the ether. So, I always talk about my little gravity flyer machine, and everybody kind of laughs, and, some people get it, some people don't. But what are you really learning when you get it? You're getting two rotational fields that are putting vortexes right dead in the center of this thing in a cold energy field that you're actually putting piezoelectric energy into. It's that simple.
Yeah. Well, listen, Nathan, for what it's worth, I laugh at you all the time. Except it's mostly because of the Star Trek episodes and not because of the ground fire and fly, man. You're doing enough cool shit without it.
Huh. It's a mechanical version of a device that should be solid state, is what it is. It's an interpreted version of something that should be solid state. And that's literally what it is. There's every single test shows it. The one great thing that it has a little bit of an advantage of is you can see the fields right away. The fields, you can manipulate them, play with them, and move them inside and out of each other on this thing way better than you can the solid state, at least from my experience. But all the same factors of your room, everything is the same. It is the greatest teaching tool you'll ever have to learn something. And that's if you do the work on it, not if you put a little hot energy into it and then you make some sparks and you call it a day.
Yeah.
I mean, you'll you'll never learn anything from that.
Yeah, I mean,
So,
that's why I had such a, and I say had, but that's why I have such a great appreciation for the thunderstorm generator. No
mhm.
matter what's talked about it, this and that, you know, it's a mechanical, visual representation of simply understood. Anybody knows it or can learn it so simply. The processes of a combustion engine, and then what occurs because of the combustion engine being, positive and negative pressure fluctuations within a vacuum closed system, or a semi vacuum closed system. It's just a total mechanical representation of everything at work, and then it's separated into parts. Where it's like, and this happens here, and that happens there, and this happens here, and then when it blows out the ass of this thing, it's clean. You kind of, and then like look at the pipe thing. Oh, look, what's this little spark guy? Look, he's dancing all around the surface. Oh, it's not a spark, it's a ball. How come it's growing?
Hmm.
Okay. Oh, you escaped because we're overcharging the system. Well, obviously, because that's not an electrical system, it doesn't really, um, although it could certainly overload. It doesn't lend itself to shorting out the same way that an electric circuit does, because that motor is going to be damn well running no matter, it's going to be running. So it's interesting, man. It's all interesting to see. And like anybody trying to get their head around these concepts, it's a great place to look. Although
Absolutely.
our chat, they damn well know like we were talking to them about the concepts, like they've been here. These guys been here.
Oh, okay. All right. So, yeah, I'll just say this in conclusion of this thing for now is that, Gerald's right when he says that everybody's coming out with the same concept on this stuff, right? Everybody's starting to understand what it is, the ether's real, and that we're going to create these effects out of all of it. That part's no doubt. What I always have a concern with is I don't want it in the wrong hands at all. If you tell me you're making a weapon out of it, you're out. You're just out. There's another level to how this thing's built and what's going on, and you'll never know it. And I'll guarantee you that.
Well, yeah, I could tell you that firsthand. I mean, that's just no good.
I mean, we talk about the effects, which are fine, but I don't think most people get past the first part of it. And
yeah,
it's one of those things that, you have a solemn promise that I'm not going to show those things because those people are out there. But I'll show you how to make cold electricity all day. You know what I mean? I'll show you how to make certain parts of certain things, but I can't show you how to put one of these things together.
Yeah,
not like that.
And there's more than one way to present the technology and get exposure to the technology and leverage the game and get it all out there to where it has to be, to the point where it's like, hey, listen, I mean, look at the news right now. And I'm just saying, we've already talked about all the nonsense and the conspiracy and blah, blah, blah. We don't need to go back into that. But I think I almost spit my drink across the room the other day when I heard somebody on like I forget what mainstream outlet it was, but it was a news report of some woman that has no idea what's going on. And she uttered the word plasmoid out of her mouth in terms of the sky phenomena, the drones, the this, that, whatever. The word plasmoid came out of her mouth, not plasma. Yeah. And I almost spit my drink across the room because I'm like, wash that word out of your mouth right now. you have no idea what you're talking about. But the fact is that, you know what? It's a good thing and a bad thing, because it's a bad thing because of the context in which it's being applied is super sketch in people's minds right now for people that don't know anything about this. Therefore, there could potentially be negative association with it. Okay, but at the same time, it's being talked about, and it's being talked about as a possible cause of like an advanced phenomena. And I think that people understand too that harnessing advanced phenomena and understanding it and being open to implementing it, the first step of it is knowing that it's a thing and it exists. So, two sides to the coin, but I'm more for the whole, hey, listen, things are getting out there. There's words that were previously nowhere in the vocabulary of, um, outside of a very limited group of esoteric thinkers in terms of these types of topics, and now it's on the 5 o'clock news and broadcast all across the world on YouTube. And, it's an incredible time. These are steps in the direction that the stuff is going to get out there. Groups like this are going to give the traction to it and show the light side of it and the useful side of it. Then there's the other people, and I kind of know what you're alluding to without having to say it, where, I get that perspective too. That perspective is, hey, listen, but you only understand the language of the sword, you know? So it's like, well, if you have something and you're not telling us about it, well, we're going to take it. And then once we have it, you only understand the language of the sword. Who are you? There's all of us, and how many of you?
I guess
But I don't think that's the greater good. That's not the greater good, man. Like that's bad.
Yeah, no, you don't want to destroy the earth when you're just figuring out a system. And unfortunately, if you're not careful, you will. And I don't want to be part of that. So, I'm directing it more towards, you know what I mean? If you're flat out saying it, that's what you want, dude, it's not right at all. The whole point of this is to better humanity. So the free energy side, put it out there. Okay. That's the number one. Better wellness. If that's what you're looking for, something, you know what I mean? Along those lines, like we said, with the meditation and stuff. Absolutely. Okay. All for that. If you want to, I don't know, grow plants like Gerald says, way faster. Absolutely. Okay. Those things are all fundamental parts of our world that we need to have. Now,
yeah,
teleportation and stuff like that should be handled by people that know what they're doing. We don't need plasmoids growing in people's houses. That's, you know what I mean? Here's your free energy device, but let's grow a plasmoid in here. You know what I mean? We're not giving you a plasma screen. We're giving you a plasmoid instead. You know what I mean? That's not fair to people. So,
I mean, listen, given what I personally know and from an outside perspective, what I believe, I guess, right? All of this stuff does just open up so many cans of worms, especially when it comes to the spiritual aspects of these things and what it actually means to be a human being and what the ultimate abilities of a human being and the potentials are. And Gerald was tapping on this last night. It was something that Jarvis and I were discussing briefly in the chat yesterday. And the context of how Jarvis and I framed it was a little bit different. I said a long, long time ago, right? I had heard something, and this was before I was into any of this train of thought, that the extraterrestrials' interest with human beings has to do with something on our fundamental level. We have some type of latent capability of being able to ascend to higher realities than they're capable of themselves. And that kind of breeds jealousy, curiosity, them trying to, like all this stuff. That's how it was framed when I heard this. I think it was on TV show. Like I took everything with a grain of salt, but I remembered it. But then, I touched on it with Jarvis last night, and then Gerald picked up. I don't even know if he saw it in the chat or not, and he mentioned more or less the same exact thing, that we have latent abilities, and these latent abilities are probably amongst the superior in terms of whatever existence holds. Once you start uncracking all this stuff and then you start getting into that layer of it, it becomes, it becomes so alternative to what life currently is that it's unrecognizable. It becomes so alternative,
Yeah.
And so I don't even know what to say, because like I can't even imagine humanity being at a full stage of enlightenment with the technology and the overall knowledge and belief of what reality actually is. Like, I just can't even fathom that. So that's, I think that was mentioned last night on the stream too, was, are we as a whole, I'm not talking about on the individual basis necessarily, are we as a whole at the stage of human evolution and maturity that that fact wouldn't destroy us or prevent us from actually attaining the higher point as a whole, which then it becomes a biblical prophecy at that point.
Well,
You're talking
look,
about people going and people not. I mean, that
look,
was written about one time. I
look
don't
at
know.
it like this. You're playing with something that is like being God and a little g. So it's not something to shake a stick at, you know what I mean, and just say that we need to do all this. I honestly think it'll all get out there, and eventually, and I think that's going to be great. What I'd like to see happen is we get people out there that are responsible to put out the free energy side, the plant growth, you know what I mean, things like that that will help humanity right away, immediately. And when you do that, I think that's the right way to go. I don't want to see somebody just because they're pissed off at something get something and try to destroy the world. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm out on that. That's not me. I won't do that. You know what I mean? I don't even mess with animals in my yard. I just let them be. You know what I mean? I'm not that kind of a person.
Yeah, I
So,
hear that.
and that has to do with my wellness and my well-being and things like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I won't promote anything like that. But if you want free energy, if you want building your plants faster, you want things like that, you want to learn cold side of energy, absolutely. Those are the things that we should be teaching. You know what I mean? And the rest of it, when humanity needs it, we'll have it.
Yeah. That's definitely the case. I'm never one for control or whatever, but I mean, there's certain things that, like, that probably shouldn't be in people's hands, and
Well, think of the
I'd be the
response.
first one to tell you that I think that you should have, an F-22 in your driveway and an M1 Abrams in the garage, but if you said that you should probably have an ICBM in in the silo next to your bunker in your yard, I'd be like, I think that's probably the line. Like, yeah,
Well,
mass ordnance, munitions is probably like,
it's probably why people like globalism.
yeah,
It's very simple. Everybody's running to the same rate, the same thing, doing everything together. There's no people going against each other. So it makes technology like this easier to get out, because then we're going to a goal for all humanity, not part of it over here or part of it over there. That's probably the attraction. Now, are there 100 pitfalls to it? Absolutely. And these people will never give up power in order for it to happen. That part will never happen. So I don't have to worry about it probably in my lifetime.
But
But
what happens to the human condition at that point? Because realistically, if, there's just these set of rules that you follow, but everything's taken care of, so you don't really have to worry. So there's no real reason to break that path because your needs are met. And at that point, what differentiates anybody from anybody? The fact that I like chocolate and you like vanilla,
okay,
or like what like where's the individuality at that point?
hold on.
And then redefine what that means to be a human being once all this is out. And for some people, like, I think that if you said, well, if you have somebody that pays your bills, you don't have to think about that, and the TV just remains on, and the lights stay on, and your rent is paid for. Like, that sounds like a pretty damn good proposition. If all you got to do is fall in line.
Okay, hold on, stop. Just stop. We're talking about a global society, not a socialist society. Okay, we're not all becoming communists overnight. That's not the way it's going to work. Okay, we're not getting our fucking puddle of drool.
The difference between socialism, and globalism, and socialism, in the context of free energy.
Maybe we all have to ascend to a higher understanding of the world and have a better goal for humanity. Maybe that's the whole reason to go to Mars, to give us something to do. Okay.
Right. We need somewhere else to sit there and struggle with. Once the struggle is gone, we got to find the next struggle.
Well, we got to give those people in the military something to do, so they can go blow up some hills over there or something. You know what I mean? I mean, I don't know what the answer is there, Joe, but I wasn't talking about some socialist thing. I'm not into that at all.
Bad, but I still don't see how
it sounded like you were going right down that road, and I'm not there at all.
Yeah,
that's not what I thought of when I thought of
us
humanity.
I have a hard time seeing it both ways, and I've become very conflicted in myself about that. And I think I've said that before. It's like you can't have it one way and the other. It's incompatible. I don't really know, man. I'm along for the ride just like you. We have no control over this stuff.
Look, man, they're going to get their money anyway. I always tell you, even if the cars run on water, you're going to the water pump at that point, and you're going to have to pay the man his taxes in order to drive your car.
I mean, listen.
Even if the ocean's right next to you.
People that desire greatness, whatever that means for them, some feeling of being greater than somebody else will always make that differentiation in any which way.
Yeah, see, we got to give them. We need to ship them to Mars. Yeah, they can feel greater on Mars.
Good luck.
They'll feel lighter. You know what I mean?
We've been trying. We've been kicking them out of office one person at a time, right? My fellow Canadians, well, not fellow, but
you
might be my fellow Canadian soon if Trump has his way.
Governor. You imagine the penalty for being a bad politician is that you get sent to Mars? Like, you're part of the Mars colony for being a crappy politician? We have a bunch of ex-presidents there not knowing why they're there. That was so great. Yeah. Living up on Mars, buddy. We don't like you no more.
Yeah, that's it, man.
Oh, man, that would be one full ship right away. How many ships can you build? Because we got a lot of them. We need to get out of here.
Yeah, true. Hey, Ben, what's up, man? Probably good that you missed that last part.
Wow. Oh, yeah, he's already going off on it.
Yeah, true. Is what it is. No, man, it's I'm interested in seeing now that these things are starting to become more vocal and amplified, and there's so many people talking about it. There really is, and I like to believe that I'm not in an echo chamber in a bubble, but it really does seem like over the last year and a half, and I mean, I've been looking at this stuff probably longer than that. It went from nothing and like very like whatever put together informational type surface level stuff to people just interested, involved, doing, talking, taking the time to get the exposure. How many people is it? It's a lot. It's a lot. And it went from nothing to a lot.
Yeah, right away too, didn't it? Like this exploded overnight kind of feeling.
It really did. I mean, I've always been interested in like anti-gravitics, and I would type in anti-gravitics, anti-gravity, experimental, this, that, the other. I'd look up any search term a couple of years ago, and I would just come up with the same stuff over and over again.
Mhm.
Now it's endless. You're like, have I seen this one yet? Oh, this one just came out. Oh, it's from this guy. Oh, okay. It's everywhere. And now you have the news anchor sitting there talking about probably one of the most significant phenomena within the technology group. So see, and again, tie it all together and say what you want. I know there's a lot of skeptics and naysayers out there, but you have the hearings that they do for the UAPs and stuff. It's all just like priming, and leading up to an ultimate opening of another chapter.
Oh, absolutely.
At this point, it's good, right? I mean, I think that enough has occurred at this point where, from the inside, so to speak, as people that kind of know about some of this stuff, like you kind of laugh. You're like, oh, look at this bunch of horse crap, whatever, and you can't believe that they didn't mention XYZ, but they mentioned this, whatever. But from the outside perspective, I mean, this is softening up a whole group of people. And
By the way, he said schmucks, right?
Schmucks.
You know why Jack knows if you have it or not, and right away? Because he knows he's working with the cold side of energy. And he let it slip when he was calling everybody schmucks, and everybody just listened to the schmucks part. They didn't listen to the rest of it. That guy knows immediately if you have it or not, because you're going to be talking about the cold side of energy. When you talk about the hot side, he's like, well, whatever. You're full of it, and I don't really care what you have to say, and you're schmucks, right? But as soon as you're talking about that, his whole puckers, man, and he's like, whoa, hold on. We need to stop and figure out what's going on here. And honestly, that's when this whole thing started going on. When that topic became popular, you'll notice the explosion happened at the same time of all this stuff coming out. It's because they started to realize all this over Unity stuff was all cold electricity. How were they getting it? How did they produce it? The circuits don't work. Well, not until you put them in reverse. Like Gerald says, put it in reverse, you're good to go, it works. You're great. And then he's done with his whole explanation of it.
Yeah. That's how I feel when I start explaining some stuff sometimes, especially to people don't really know all too much. I'm like, all right, I'm going to tell you all about it. All is nothing, and nothing is all. Have a good day.
More confused.
It's like, wait, what? Yeah, no, that's really it. All is nothing, nothing is all. Thank you.
Oh man.
I'm gonna write a one sentence book.
Yeah, what's gonna scare the living daylights out of them when they start figuring out, hey, it wasn't the 1,000,000 volts that I needed. It wasn't that energy pushing through it, because that would never work. It's a waste. When they start figuring out, hey, I'm creating plasma in this that's just blowing out everywhere as ion wind, I have a waste. You're just, you might as well go over the mirror and laugh at yourself, because at that point, when you have so much wasteful stuff, do you really think that you're building energy up into fields and stuff? I mean,
okay, devil's advocate here. Listen, plasma wind isn't absolutely useless. Okay, it's a useful component to something else.
You want to sterilize your room, maybe.
Well,
you got too much gas. That might be a useful tool for it.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I could see it being a useful component as part of something else. That's all I'm saying.
When you're in space, absolutely. You could putter around in space with it, absolutely.
I still don't think that's the most effective way, but maybe locally, or it sort of is, locally meaning here to the moon or here to Mars. Maybe that is the more practical way, because like I said, if you were to sit there and do what I said before about the projecting situation, you're gonna be fast real quick. Like and I mean, maybe stopping's not an issue, but whatever. I don't really know. Is it? I have no idea, man. Like this stuff is just so speculative sometimes. It's like I run my mouth and I'm like, is it? I don't know.
Well, all you need is pressure and motion in space. So create a little ion wind, take a little static pressure, push it towards one side. You might be able to get that craft to move extremely fast in space.
Yeah, but not fast enough.
Well, you're not going anywhere far, at least not yet.
That was my whole point of that, right? If you're not going anywhere far, then yeah, pretty much. If you're going somewhere far, you're gonna need better than that.
Well, that kind of tells you something, doesn't it? It's a waste of energy. It doesn't work in a pressurized system like we have here, where it's positive pressure. You go to negative pressure, it works. Well, a lot of things work in negative pressure that don't work in positive pressure. You go there to prove your experiments. That's great. What are they doing in the environment we're in now? Because they're not doing anything. Matter of fact, they're not even noticeable. Like when you put a anode and a cathode out there and you want to create this field that comes off of it, looks like a beautiful star, which those things are gorgeous. Well, what do you got? You got your negative sitting there on the outside of the aluminum, and you got the positive going into the center core of this thing, and the fields try to get into that dielectric state. So they're pulling out in order to get there. Gorgeous look, ultimately useless in what we're in. It's just an energy ball. It's a perceived field. Well, why don't you take something in there that grows the field and see if it shows up then? Quit putting the negative to the outside of the machine. Put it in, put a little spaceship in there. Put the fields in it the right way and see if that field grows around it. Not putting something in there that gives you a false test where it's like, hey, pull to the outside of this. That's useless because it doesn't do that in space. It doesn't pull to the outside like that. It's not the same field.
So let me ask you about this, because this is something that came to me in meditation. Then I had contemplated it deeply at one time and felt like I had an epiphany, but frankly, for some reason, I really can't regain the full train of thought. But I remember the basic concept. So if you have anything to say on it, cool. But it has to do with the most novel and fascinating of some of these phenomena, right? So imagine a material, okay, that would work as a electrodynamic iridescent. Okay, so basically a material that is relative in terms of how it receives, waveform. So the waveform comes in, and from perspective, let's say from here, it's one waveform, but from here, it's a whole nother frequency and waveform. And it would actually separate like a prism, like an iridescent effect. It would separate the different waveforms and functions. It would act like an electromagnetic prism, so to speak, in a material. And what that would mean to being able to get something into resonance. Because that would probably because it's iridescent and it splits everything apart, and it depends on angle and relativity in that sense. Technically, I think that would fall directly into resonance at a point and then hit a sympathetic resonance throughout, meaning that you could have something that's in resonance with whatever the strongest ambient resonance is in a certain locality, which means that it could seamlessly be integrated or pass through or whatever, and whatever the output is.
Okay.
I'm just saying like that. I mean, it was like a weird thing that kind of came to mind, but like I went a lot deeper with it at one point where I was like, wow, this is really something. Then like, I don't know. I think that it left the building. That one left the building.
Oh man, yeah, I've had those days, Joe.
Yeah.
Where you think you have the greatest thing in the world. I'm not saying that you're wrong in what you're saying. I know how to create resonance in something very easily. So
Yeah.
I mean, I've done how do I say it? Sympathetic resonance, and with two different coils that don't match at all,
Mhm.
and force
Yeah,
them
right. I've
into
seen
it.
it.
So we'll find out how much more special perfect resonance is soon. So I just got in my wire today to build my 4 coils to put them in perfect resonance. So you're saying there's resonance in each layer? Is that kind of where you're going? Different resonance frequency in each layer?
It's like I said, like my understand, I like had an understanding of it that made so much logical sense at one time, and it's just kind of like left the building. But it has to do with like material being a like electrodynamically. So no matter what this radiation source is, being refractive in a way that separates the waveforms in the material itself of what's being put on it, meaning that it's like almost like a neutral. It's almost like it doesn't have resonance, but it does. But it's able to. I don't know, man. Like I need to marinate in this one a little bit more, and then I guarantee you that I'll be like, oh yeah, that
So
because I'm not explaining it right.
is it like a semiconductor state out of something that shouldn't be semiconductor?
It's sort of like that. It's sort of like that, but it also acts as a prism. Yeah, an electromagnetic prism. So whatever the electromagnetic radiation is, doesn't matter what it is. It acts to split those and then those waveforms, and then where those waveforms relative location is on the material, okay, is actually varying depending on like where it's viewed from, so to speak, or that's what the relative factor is. I had a whole entire like reason that this is significant, and it's just super eluding me.
Does it have to do with 2 plates being so close together that they create a direction
No, no,
or
I
an
actually
energy?
no, no, no. I know that one.
Okay.
I know that one. That would make sense, but that limits the waveform in between those 2 plates that are so close together, which is the whole entire
Well,
catalyst.
you said you wanted to separate them, so I just figured,
That's fair, but the ones that we're gonna dead this one for now because I'm gonna drive myself nuts trying to remember and then mis-explaining something and worse than I already have.
well,
I was the one that brought it up though, so it was on me.
so let's just go a little further with this. When you put high voltage on 2 aluminum plates and you put them too close together, what do you get? You get a laser. You see that people aren't understanding of this. So you're over
Yeah,
there
an ELF
trying.
wave laser.
Yeah, you want to build pressure, right? And you have no idea about coding and stuff, right? So you push these 2 plates together, and all of a sudden they start sparking over, and then you push them together closer and closer. You get this laser popping out of it, and you're thinking you're over here creating anti-gravity, right? And you're going, oh, but it's just this easy, right? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, that's what they call a directed energy weapon. Bro.
Yeah, let's maybe code the plates a little bit, are we? Should we do that? But hey, let's go to TT Brown and find out exactly why he put something in between each one of those plates. You know what I mean? So that they didn't create a laser, so that they could give them the pressure without the laser. That's why that field is in there, because it's a non-conductive source that turns into a semiconductor when in this field. Then it produces the lift that you want.
It's like a hose nozzle. You need to turn it off stream.
Oh man, I don't know where you were going with that. I was gonna say,
Oh, what? You thought I was talking about if you pinch the rope on accident? Don't pinch the rope. Your wife will get mad. Hey, pissing all over the
Oh,
floor.
yeah. You don't even need the gas to make that laser. By the way, that laser is natural. It has to do with the eddy currents in there. So I've seen a lot of people with the gas. By the way, they put the gas in there and make beautiful lasers with it. So
that's amazing.
Yeah, those are cool videos, man. I always stop and watch one of those. I mean, there's one guy out there that does all kinds of different lasers with it, and it's like I don't even want to work with those gases in my garage. Like I got enough gas in here for me. I don't need them. It would just be interference. We would create a pressure situation in the garage.
Well, maybe you just pipe it in higher concentration direct from the source and see what it does. I used to do that in the back of my friend's car. He used to yell at me, "You're gonna make me fucking crash."
I need a thunderstorm generator for my ass.
Let's say it was methane and now it's breathable air. Your wife would probably like that. That'd be good.
Oh, that's funny. Oh man, now it's getting silly, Joe. We're getting to the end, man.
Yeah, we're getting a little silly. It's okay though. You have plenty of sound bites for the members section.
do another video, man. That last one was hilarious, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of this stuff, man, is it's out there and it's great. I think it's absolutely outstanding that it's everywhere. I have my reservations about certain stuff, but if you're doing it for the right reasons or for the right things, absolutely. I would love, by the way, to be part of that Hutchison thing to rebuild his experiment. That would be interesting.
It really would be. Really would be.
So that, and maybe show what's in the cases when they do it next time. They say that there's a bipolar Tesla coil in there. I'd just like to see it. I don't see, how are you running it? That's what I would want to know, because until lately, I built one out of a ZVS. I built one out of a Slayer Exciter, but I've never seen anybody else do it. They're usually spark gaps or, a specialty coil system, or I don't know. So
yeah,
it's just
John Hutchinson's a unique example. That's for sure.
His stuff, man, is wild. Okay, what he builds, because he's got access to all kinds of stuff I don't. If I had a Navy ship next to me, you know what I mean? That I got to pull everything out, put it in my garage. It'd be wild, man.
Yeah, it's like sometimes it feels like working on Junkyard Wars.
Yeah.
You remember that show from back when, man? That was crazy.
Yeah, what can you create?
Yeah. You just unleash a couple people in a junkyard. You're like, okay, you got to make a boat out of all this crap. It's like,
can you imagine what this whole crew would do if we sat there in there, man? The crazy, insane ideas that come out of it, and then you have the ability to build it. We'd be in trouble.
It'd be amazing. Yeah. I'd love to see the day.
Oh, man.
Yeah. Jarvis, get in touch with me, man. I saw you in the chat much, much earlier saying, see if I wanted to get down working on something with you. I told you, reach out to me. I told you how to get me. So, yep. Brandon's a schmuck. Figured I'd say that on the live.
I don't know why you say that. Brandon's the coolest guy ever, man.
Yeah, Brandon's a fucking schmuck. You don't really know. No, Brandon's really the best.
he abuses that TV. That poor plasma TV. It looks like a Halloween house. Like you go in there, like they do it on purpose, and they're making this TV with all these strange things going on, and you get all these effects going on in the room with it. That's what it feels like to me every time I see it.
Yeah, I'm telling you. If you ever want to have a bonfire, let me tell you something. This guy can make a fire. I mean, he made like a burn pot. This thing probably has 20 feet of fire coming out the top of it. I'm like, holy smokes! Think you got enough draft, man?
He's doing his melting metals in it. And he
Yeah,
wasn't doing it on purpose.
awesome dude. So
So funny, man. Yeah, I'll have to show that, man. That poor TV. So, is it all right? Oh, hold on. My TV shut off for a second. Oh, there it goes. Okay. Is it all right if I show that? Oh,
I
that'd
don't
be
want to
so
talk
funny,
for
man.
him.
Let me see if I can't pull it up real quick. That was my finger hit the button over here.
He's laughing, so that probably means yes.
All right. Dude, you got to see this thing, man. This is wild. Like that TV is okay.
All right, Brandon, you're famous.
That's got like horror movie written all over it.
Does it? I told him. I said, "Should I send a priest?"
Yeah.
I was like, I'm telling you, man. Guy
What's
does-
crazy is he's showing a bucket when he's over there lighting up his painting tray, and his TV's going all crazy.
He's one of the most innovative people and resourceful people that I've ever met in my life. Like, yeah, he's shown me all this crazy stuff he's done. And it's always just from stuff laying around. I don't think that the guy's ever ordered anything online or went to the hardware store or anything. Like, right?
Oh, that's so funny.
Yeah, he started messing with the bug zapper the other day. It was hilarious. Yeah,
Oh man, that's so funny.
definitely need an exorcist. Could you imagine being a neighbor walking by that?
No, that's what I'm saying. Like,
I don't think he has many
legitimately,
neighbors, but
if you said that UFOs were landing by his house based on that, they'd absolutely believe you.
well, if nothing else, Brandon, you definitely have a career in SFX. Yeah, just like you could light the outside of haunted houses for thunderstorms for days, man.
So let's see. Is that? Let's see if he's got. Oh, here we go. Maybe this is a better one. Yeah, that's just freaky.
I don't know. He was doing some crazy stuff with running like a couple of like graphite bits and just running a huge current through them on a spark gap and then having that hooked up to a just a plasma screen like with no circuitry whatsoever.
Oh my
And
god.
you could see all of the energy pulsing and running through it, and then it holds like a capacitance, like, and it'll spontaneously light up and stuff in all different spots of the plasma screen for like days, and be reactive, like environmentally reactive based on like the heat and like oscillations in the immediate area. It's crazy. Like he did
Oh my
some weird,
god.
crazy stuff. I was like, yo, man, this is awesome.
Dude, that poor TV. Like, how does it keep going? Like, I know he's not using the power source. That's probably been dead like the first day.
Well, the TV's not hooked up to anything. It's simply the panel. So I think as long as it holds a vacuum, it just is what it is. Like he could like whatever kind of mesh circuitry fires the pixels and stuff, it could be burning out all over the place, but it'll still find another path. And like because I guess there's like still like again a capacitance charge inside the vacuum of the panel itself where the gases are, it still is able to move around in its own volition to a degree.
We're gonna have to get a Fry It and Find Out award and give that out, Joe, because that's definitely deserving of one.
Yeah. I'll tell you what. If it's Fry It and Find Out award, I'm sure he could probably dig into the bank and find better than that.
Oh, when he,
He's king of
oh
Friday.
yeah,
Find out.
it's like the one of the first ones he sent me. He grabbed this washing machine motor, those flat ones, the big disc. So he goes, okay, let me just put some capacitors to it, and let me put a couple of full bridge rectifiers on this thing, right? And I have no idea how he wired it in. And then he takes his drill and starts this thing up, man, and just lightning starts shooting everywhere out of everything. And you're like, oh my God, dude.
I know. Yo,
Like,
man, he was showing. He was like showing me. He's like, oh, it's welded, whatever. And this is my welder. It's like an alternator.
yeah.
He's welding with an alternator. I was like, oh, yep. I guess that'd do the trick. Never thought about it. But sure, why
It
not?
was one of those feelings, Joe, where you wanted to be in the room there with him, but at the same time, you absolutely wanted to be nowhere near it.
Listen, Brandon knows with me, and he's a good friend of mine. It's all peace and love, me and him. But I will tell you, I warned him repeatedly. I'm like, bro, you are gonna kill yourself.
Yeah.
The stuff you're doing is dangerous. He's like, I can't stop playing, man. I was like, listen, I'm cool. But like, be careful, man. Only because I care about you, I say that.
He said, thank you for giving me the I don't even know what to call it, like the vibe to get out there and just start burning stuff up. And I'm going, oh God, what did I create? Like, because you start seeing what's coming out of his area he's working in, and it's like, oh my God, like that's ruthless compared to what I'm doing.
Listen, if you ever saw the pile of shit he has access to, like once useful devices that are just like parts and parts and parts and parts, this guy will probably get something off the ground before any of us. To be real.
Yeah, we're definitely gonna have to invite him to the junkyard with us, because that's some ingenuity right there.
Yeah, we'll have to coax him into coming on.
Yeah. Well, right on, man. That's a good way to end the show, Joe.
Amen.
2 hours. So, yeah, you know what? I kind of want to do. Well, we'll figure it out for next week. But I'd like Gerald to join us for Light Body if he can.
I would really like that. That's Gerald should definitely get on with us on that, and I definitely think that should be next week. So, something to look forward to, everybody. Little preview. Yeah. Light Body next week.
Yeah, if he gets all caught up on everything he's doing, man, that'd be awesome. Because, yeah.
But plasmatic light force, we're going there.
Yeah, that's so awesome. So we got one more show. We got Monday, and then that's it, man. We got Christmas.
Yep, I want everybody to have a merry, safe, and happy Christmas. And
absolutely,
you and your family, and we'll be together.
Right on, guys, and we'll try to do a live experiment before Christmas. So I would love it if I was home on Christmas, man. I would light it up all day. I would do hot energy and just have fun. But I won't be here for Christmas that day, so I'll have to do it the day before.
All right, I have a special request. Whatever your experiment is going to be before Christmas, can it involve a Santa hat?
Maybe. I don't know if I own one. I'm going to have to buy one, Joe.
Oh, man. I just spent like at least $1.50 or $2 of yours. I'm sorry.
I go to the dollar store and see what I can't pick up to zap, and I'll just hit it with some hot voltage. What do you think about that?
Listen, whatever you have in mind, I'm on board with. Maybe get two, so you could wear one, and then one could be experimented on.
Well, since you said that, Joe, let me see if I can't talk you into this. I was going to strap a testicle onto my back, run AC power through it, and put it through my fingers. What do you think?
I don't know for that? I mean, I don't know how I feel about that. You know better than me, man.
Sean says it tickles. So I would have to test it first to see if it tickles.
Well, it's better strap it to your back than stick it up your ass, I suppose.
Well, you know what? I did high voltage with coax cables, okay? And I just taped them to my fingers. So I got like a little bit of sparkle out, right? And it felt like it was a little sparkler. So what I figured out with these Tesla coils, you can have multiple different, exit points. So if you put them on your fingers with the coax cable, you're safe on that part. But then massive lightning bolts come out of your hand like you're the emperor, you know what I mean? And you just start zapping something. I guess
Do it.
You may have to have a grounding ring in front of you just so you don't die.
Yeah.
That might
Just try not to die, man. Like that's the worst. I mean, it might not be, but I mean, I presume from the human perspective that that's the worst.
that would be a great video. It'd be like this one to open my channel with every time I do a video. I would have to play that.
I got to be real. You should do. I mean, with the discharge, I mean, you could probably light like a fluorescent bulb, right?
More.
Why not?
Oh,
No,
Joe, these are 13-inch sparks that comes out of these things.
18-inch sparks.
Yeah. No. I built some awesome Tesla coils, man. We're talking AC this
Out
time,
of your
not DC.
fingers?
Out of my fingers.
I don't know, man. This shit doesn't sound safe.
No, it doesn't.
This does not. I don't know that I condone this, brother.
That's
Listen,
why.
dude, I'd love to see it, but I don't condone it.
So I gotta test it and see if it tickles.
At least you can. There's a knob. You can work up to the big stuff. I guess. Maybe like try something that like barely kills you.
So the last time, man, it was 60,000 volts, but like not even really an amp, and I was just going like this and playing tickle fingers on this thing. The bad thing is they all didn't come out at once. It was like one, then the next, and the next. I'm thinking I want them, boom, you know what I mean?
That would be insane. Like,
Yeah.
You should absolutely do that. Yeah. You should do it. Yeah.
Well, you said you're up for it, so if I do it, you're doing it, Joe.
Oh, I don't know, man. I don't have a Tesla coil, so.
Yeah, we'll send you one.
Oh boy, here we go.
We'll call it the tickler after Sean if it works out. Oh, see what you maybe look at, Brendan. Now I'm talking about insane ideas after looking at your stuff. Inspiration is so bad for me.
All right. Well, I guess we'll see how that one goes.
All right, guys. We'll figure it out.
Awesome.
All right, guys. You guys have been awesome in the chat, man. Sorry to put up in your comments. I was trying to focus on the discussion today. So thanks, guys. I really appreciate it, man. Have yourself a great day.
All right. Good night, everybody. Peace and love.